right. Welcome back, everyone, to our regular viewers. And thank you for joining us for our second episode of our third season. If you are new to our podcast, a new peer ally, or new to the workforce, we're so glad we found you. This podcast is for behavioral health clients and consumers, advocates, allies, peer support workers, community health workers, and community stakeholders, where we talk about advocacy, recovery, peer support, and provide education related to legislative changes to statewide policy to empower you as a client, consumer, or ally to lift up your voice as a stakeholder in the public behavioral health system. I'm Nicole Chilton, and with me today are my incredible teammates.
I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm Nicole.
And we also have the pleasure of visiting with the executive director of Help is Hope to talk with us about how technology and AI are advancing and affecting behavioral health for peer-led organizations today.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm so glad we're here. So before we get started, we just want to get to know you a little bit more. What is one small thing in your daily life that brings you joy or makes you happy?
I don't know if you guys can see it, but do you see my Keurig pods in the background of my coffee maker? I would say that is probably my number one joy. Like, people know not to talk to me until I've had that cup of coffee. So I come in the office and I haven't had one yet, and I go right to my coffee maker after I've opened everything up, and I pour Nestle espresso powder in my cup, and then run it through the Keurig with a pod in it. So it's my jet fuel, and that gets my day started. And that's how I would say that's my little, like, unless somebody knows me, that's my little daily dose of like self-care is a nice kick in the butt of caffeine.
Love that. Very relatable.
Yeah, that is very relatable. Yes, absolutely. I do the same thing in the morning. Now, just moving a bit forward. So I have a little bit of a two-part question for you. So Help is Hope serves adults in the Central Valley, a region where we know that there's some digital access challenges. Before we dive into specific tech, can you paint a picture of who your clients are and what brings them through your doors? And then can you share about some of the digital access challenges they might have and how the advocates can help overcome these challenges?
Yeah, so here in the Central Valley, just to paint the picture a little bit before we even get into digital access problems, is I think first literacy. So the core audience that we serve are people that are Greek crisis. So those are the folks that are typically living below the poverty line. They're some people refer to them as the working poor, and that's no slight or stigma. It's just the fact of the matter is the cost of living is so high, right? That people are doing the best they can, but that single mom working at the Dollar Tree 40 hours a week with 3 kids, that's not enough to sustain her. And so I would say that our number one core audience are trying to catch those people before they become homeless, with housing or before that addiction that they use to self-medicate. So that's kind of our core audience, is finding those people that are about to have to live in their car, or they're going through a mental health crisis and they don't know that they actually have coverage for that. So that's our number one audience, is because there's a lot of help out for the homeless and people with substance use, but there's not as much help, and there's a much larger audience for that level just above it, where they may be making enough to pay the rent, but not enough to actually buy food after the rent's paid. So that is the focus that we have kind of shifted towards. And that audience, typically we find, don't always graduate high school. So, and with the California education system the way it is, we're looking at about an 8th grade reading level, typically. So combine that with maybe not knowledge, depending on where they came from or what they're familiar with, or even the age group, right? I came on the cusp and got in technology about 2000. And so that was kind of, I was the last generation. I don't know if any of you guys can relate that remember what the dial-up sound was. You remember like before cell
Yes.
phones. I think we're the last of that generation, right? Where we lived both in the analog days. And then we had to like in high school kind of like that was the first like experience about computers. And so if you didn't ride that wave, if your parents weren't necessarily from this country or affluent, right? Because computers used to cost $1,000, right? So they were extremely expensive. They weren't like the cell phones now. I remember paying 39 cents a minute for my track phone, like when they started out. So it was really a luxury. It wasn't something that people needed like today. And so I think that knowing that and realizing that the Central Valley has sometimes a limited education level, and then you introduce not no experience with tech or limited experience with tech, and you're looking at sometimes generations living within the same household. So you're looking at sometimes grandparents, parents, and even the kids all living together, and you're trying to see like the younger kid generation trying to like educate the older generation. And so there's a big gap, and especially in the agricultural areas of uh, the Central Valley, it could be large gaps where there's limited internet coverage. Um, and if somebody can't afford a plan, to be honest, the government phones, the coverage is spotty at best. And they're limited, right? They're limited to how much bandwidth. And, a lot of times now movies or anything takes up a lot of that. And then you don't have bandwidth left to actually like make an appointment or be on telehealth where it's going to consume a lot of data. So we're finding that gap exists, and that people they actually want to use technology, surprisingly, but they don't always have access to it or know how. And that's the hurdles and barriers that we're attempting to overcome.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi prong issue where you have structural issues, resource issues, and poor education issues. Maybe the schooling's not that great, or and what have you. And then add on to that maybe language barriers and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely can be an overwhelming process to just understanding technology and getting that literacy.
Well, like you said, like that goes to the point that um, you know, it's one thing to have access and know how to use it, but then it's another thing to ask for help in doing that. So you go online, but then now what? Now what? Where do I go to actually find help? And who's a fraudulent website? Who can actually help me? Who's data mining my stuff, right? And so, like, once you do overcome those hurdles, there's still the hurdle of now, how do I actually access help?
Yeah. And that's kind of a perfect segue to the next part of our discussion. As a CEO who also does hands-on work, you're in it, we feel it. When did you first realize that technology wasn't just a back office tool, but something that could really directly change outcomes for the people you serve?
Well, I would start back with my background in component level computer repair way back in 2000, aging myself, right out of high school, and realizing like when we had to still go to the libraries and the internet was new, right? We were going, wait, there's a way to like access other people's knowledge and talk to people across the world. And so right there was like something in me was like, okay, I'm gonna be a nerd. Like I'm gonna be a hot nerd, but I'm gonna be a nerd. And so like I realized I was like, okay, this is gonna change the world. And it did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with watching uh, how technology has evolved, um, I started using it in little ways. Everybody was kind of building websites that were more like glorified brochures or postcards, and you kind of just put your business card up there, your shingle, right? And you're like, hey, I'm here. And that's all that was kind of required before. Like you got on Google, you just basically used it as a glorified business card. Uh, but as we were able to start accepting forms and interacting with people and sending a lot more email, where that became like, who uses the stamp anymore, right? People paying bills online. It evolved into a process um, where people were really starting to adopt it, seeing that, especially like paying bills and managing accounts and stuff like that. But I think what really fast forwarded everything was COVID, no doubt. I'm
Mhm.
sure you guys can attest to this, right? When we're forced to use Zoom, it was like the world got a free, really fast course in video conference calling.
Yeah.
And we all used it a little bit. It was like one of those novelty things, like, oh,
Mhm.
call me on Zoom, right? And now it's like it's a daily part. I mean, I don't know that I go a day without having a Zoom call. So, and it's funny, like when somebody asks me to call them, I'm like, are you sure? Like, should I take your temperature? Like, we're so used to that interaction, right? And so I think that fast forwarded everybody where it became the norm. It became very acceptable, and I think it also pushed telehealth, right? Therapy, meeting with your doctors, all the people that meeting with lawyers, all the appointments that you would have now you can do in your pajamas if you want to, and so I think that really fast forwarded and made it so that okay, this is something sustainable. And then when Medi-Cal said, yeah, you're allowed to not only make phone calls, but Zoom calls is appropriate for like community health work and peer support, um, it just really blew the doors open for being able to assist people that maybe have conditions like agoraphobia or
Mhm.
they're worried about stigma or they're worried about or it's just hard for them to get out of bed. Depression and anxiety is so severe that I had a lady that just getting in her car was overwhelming for her. And to be able to go on and use Zoom and meet her where she was at, literally, I mean, even if that's laying in bed, um, that made me realize that it is absolutely not a back office tool. And then we tried, so we're being a small organization, we can pivot quickly. And so I thought I was going to have an aversion to people giving us their information for follow ups and for especially peer support or community health work or just asking for help. And I found the exact opposite's true because um, people are more apt to work with AI and a chatbot and a talking website because the stigma is not built in. There's no inherent biases like we have as humans. And all my stuff is like trained, trauma informed, right? And yes, it doesn't have the same lived experience, but it does instantly validate them. So they're able to talk and the technology can actually say like, I'm really sorry you're going through this. It must be very difficult. So once we hit that point in technology being able to help people, that's when I'm like, we got to adopt this full force and then see. And we've had an amazing response. Like it's nothing that I could have imagined. Like, and people, they're engaging with us. And like, it's weird because I tell people like sometimes it looks like I'm running a show business because like we don't have the foot traffic that some of the organizations have
Mhm.
because we have so much online activity going on, whether it's checking out our social media, doing Zoom calls, or filling out a form to get a call back from a care coach, right? So we have all those options and people are availing themselves of it. So that's definitely when we realized like, okay, the spaghetti stuck, so it's done and we need to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk more about the website. So you mentioned that originally a lot of people were kind of using their website as a glorified business card. And I think we still see that today where organizations really focus on the about us portion of their website and really make that the core of it.
Yeah.
But we know you've taken a different approach. So what does it mean to design a website that is for the client rather than just being about the organization?
Well, we say peer led, right? So if we say peer led, um, if we brag about what we do, which is amazing, right? We become a commercial. And especially this new generation, I would say literally from 2000 on, they have been marketed to since they were babies. They have been marketed every chance they get. I mean, they got to watch a commercial, to watch a YouTube video, to watch their cartoons. They've been constantly marketed to from infancy. And so there's a desensitization, I think, of people bragging about what they do. And so when we as an organization flash up, it almost is like it just blows over, like we're watching a Tempur-Pedic mattress ad. Yeah, we know, like, when we're going to buy a mattress, there's top of mind awareness, but that doesn't solve somebody's problem when they're in pre-crisis or in crisis.
Mhm.
So we flipped the script and we said, okay, peer-led organization, what do they want? And so I went through all of the chatbot, and I looked at the history, and I looked what people were looking up on Google that weren't finding resources, and I basically reverse engineered everything. And then I'm really good at I'm an empath, so I'm really good at like putting myself in somebody's position. And many times I've availed myself of the very services that we offer. And so I put myself in a client's perspective, and it was like, imagine if I was 2 paychecks away from living in my car. Like, does me saying all this beautiful nonprofit talk, this speak that we use internally, right? Saying trauma informed and peer led, and right, using all of it, even the word peer support for my core audience who may have limited education or experience with a nonprofit and they suddenly need help. They don't care about all that. They want to know, hey, I got an eviction notice. How can you help me? And that's what they Google. They don't Google housing stability program, right? That's not how they talk. That's not even how we talk to our friends. That's how we talk in the industry, but that's not how we talk to our friends, right? So I just imagine, what if I was sending a text to one of my best friends? How would I send it, right? Because that gets read, that goes through. And so that's how I built our website. I built our website so that I hit the core pain points of what somebody's going through, instead of saying, hi, it's us, right? I started out originally with a big logo and help is hope. And I'd be like, the name's going to be great. People are going to know who I am. And like, but the problem is, it is great and the name's great. But the thing is like, people don't want to know how much you know. They don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care, right? And so we had to show how much we care by being right in those pain points, and honestly assessing, can we help them with those? Is that beyond our level of care, or no, we can definitely help this. And what we found is, through the partners and what we've accomplished, we did see that, you know what, we can absolutely step into these pain points, and we'd be crazy not to, because it's such a large audience that needs help. And so that's how we reverse engineered basically the entire client experience and just came from it. And our About Us page, I love it. But even then, it's more of our origin of how me starting the organization was somebody who needed these exact services that I now provide.
That's great. So, given that you really, really focused on what the user experience is, right? Like, what are they going to get out of it? If someone's coming to your site, say at 2 a.m. in a crisis, or maybe it's a family member searching for help, what is it that you want them to feel within the first 30 seconds? And how did you sort of design for that moment?
I'll tell you, when I came out in 2015 and I didn't have any support, and I had lost my whole family, I remembered what it felt like to have to be my own life support. And I knew that when I built this organization, that I couldn't solve anyone's problems, but what I could do is make sure that they never went through them alone. So the one thing the 2 a.m. promise that I make is that when you find our website, you found somebody who cares, somebody that will walk beside you. I won't walk behind you, and I won't walk in front of you, but our organization will walk beside you, and that you're not alone. And I think that is the door that opens up all the other things, because that gives you a glimmer of hope, that gives you that you know that there might not be a white knight on a horse that's going to come save you, but the rescue team has been called and somebody is going to get back with you, and they do care. And so the way that I implemented that, because obviously we can't be up at 2 a.m., right?
Right.
And so what we did is we partnered with a company in Japan, actually, who their software was specifically made to sell things to people, explain products, explain. I went to the CEO, and fortunately, I had an office here in San Francisco, and the lady's like, I can connect you directly to Japan. And I was like, okay. And I got to talk to the CEO, and I said, what if I make services the product and have your bot explain the services? And he's like, we haven't even thought of that business model, to be honest. And he was like, why don't you test it out for me? And I'll give you a lifetime membership. And so what our website does now is if you click on that you need help 24/7, it literally says, we've named her Helen, right? You click on it, it's a very conversational, it works on your cell phone, it works on the website, and she greets you and you just tell her, you can say, I'm on meth and I'm living under a bridge and I don't know if I want to be here anymore. And she will validate your concern and be like, well, you reached out today. I actually tested this out. That's why I know the response. She said, you reached out today. So something tells me that you still want to be around. And I get emotional because I get to see these people's responses. Like I get to see the conversation in writing. I don't listen to the recordings because I'm a big ball baby and I probably just start bawling all the time. But I can actually get to the person at 2 a.m. and somebody responds. And surprisingly, you would think like, oh, it's a robotic voice. She's very conversational. And the thing is that people are interacting with it. And it pushes appointments, it pushes 988, it pushes 911 when it's appropriate. And I even tested it out myself and used the model. And I said, that I didn't know if I wanted to be here anymore. And she talked around it. She first said, can I encourage you to text 988? Can you get, take your phone and can we pause this conversation? And are you willing to text 988? And I said, no, not really. I don't think I'm that bad. I don't need that much help. And I continued to talk with her. And she reasoned with me on the different points and said she was proud that I had made the call and all this stuff. And then maybe 5 minutes later, she brought it back to 988 and she said, now, do you think you'd be ready again to maybe just give 988 a try? And I was like, yeah, actually, I was like, she convinced me and I used to sell cars. And I was like, dang, she's good, So that's what gives me hope is that we are able to be that 2 a.m. in crisis, people that are desperately searching for help when other enterprises, other government agencies close the hard 5 o'clock. And there are some warm lines, but we're finding with the government cuts and funding, right, they're going away. And so this is kind of my solution, my little contribution to making sure that people still feel supported. And crazy enough, I get more requests during the middle of the night than I do in the day. Yep.
I think that is such an impactful experience for you to have as you're testing out your own technology and putting it into practice and seeing how that model works and recognizing that need is there. Sounds like more so in the middle of the night. And how does that technology translate for our users? And so knowing that there's a lot of debate in regards to technology and whether it's helping or hurting mental health, and especially for younger people, wondering where you land on that. I might be able to assume from this conversation, but I'd love to hear a little bit more where you land on that. Is it the tool or how we use it?
So I definitely want to say from a very firm perspective that although I love technology and I'm a nerd and we are a tech forward nonprofit, technology is never meant to replace humans. It is 100% made to augment what we can do. So we can't, right? We can't be up at 2 a.m. But I can talk somebody off the ledge using technology and then follow up with them at 8 o'clock the next morning as she promises. And make that human decision, right? Do we need to escalate this? Do we need to call a specialist? Do we need to call somebody who has more training in this situation? Or was it somebody drunk or just having, maybe they're just going through a divorce? It could be situational, right? It can be conditional, or it could be a mental health issue where somebody needs real help and medication and maybe therapy. And so the technology, what it does, separate from her, like any forms that we use, any technology we use, including AI, all it does is the meaning. Well, other than my chatbot does a lot of work, but I would say like the other parts of AI, what they do is they free up my staff's time and my time to be able to give them that one-on-one focus. And they have already like us, know us, and trust us because we've kind of gotten past all the stuff. They clicked on the boxes and told us their situation. They don't have to tell us all that again. And I come from an informed perspective when I go into a Zoom meeting or I sit down with someone. They don't have to repeat all that. And I think that's empowering when they already know their story and I'm like, hey, so you shared with me that you're living in your car currently, right? And you just lost your job. And they don't have to repeat that because I think that's what they're used to, is going from one organization to the next to the next. And they've had to repeat their story 5 different times to get 5 different kinds of help. And what I can do is I act as that filter and grab all that information, and then I can make those calls to those people and share that information with releases of information, of course. But I can get the right, so that my client doesn't have to do that heavy lifting when they're in that crisis or pre-crisis situation. Because like you tell them, hey, you got to call these 5 places and you got to drive all the way around town. You're living in your car, gas is $6 a gallon. Like, what are you asking from me, right? Versus that warm handoff that I can call up organizations and be like, hey, I have a client, this is their situation. And they just get to walk in the door and be greeted, and that person already knows what's going on. So I think that part, plus resource mapping. We use technology to resource map. So what it would take a social worker 8 hours to find resources, I can do in 3 minutes with a special tool that I developed. And that allows us to not be using valuable peer time, right? That's a peer support time, looking for resources and having them sit in my office. We're able to like look that up ahead of time. They get that sent to them in an email, and they get to walk in, and then I get to tell them how exactly to apply, or where they got maybe stuck on a form. Or so our time becomes we're able to fast forward through kind of the monotony of what it takes to serve a client, and I can get really to the meat and potatoes, the heart of what's going on with them in a very quick amount of time. And that helps them, especially, right? Because timing is everything when you're in crisis or pre-crisis, right? And so we're able to take that and shrink that timeline of getting help from weeks to sometimes hours. And that means all the difference to people that are going through DV, or they're ready for recovery and they need it now, not a week from now or 2 weeks from now, because they may relapse in that time. They need support now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see that frequently, that wait times are one of the number one deterrents for people getting help. So that's a huge win if it only takes a few hours rather than weeks. You've kind of already answered our next question. We were going to ask you about your philosophy on where AI and apps should step back and where human connection must take over. And you've kind of already touched on that. But maybe you could share more if somebody were like entering this work for the first time or exploring for themselves how to use technology. Maybe how would you advise them?
I would definitely advise. We actually offer a service now that recently, because we had quite a few requests for it. So we're starting to offer a service called Vision Ventures, where we actually help other nonprofits to be able to help navigate technology, especially this emerging technology, in a way that is responsible, reasonable, and respectful. Because if you don't build in those guardrails and stuff, technology is still not perfect, right? I don't know that it'll ever be, because it's created by imperfect people. So it does good, but it will never replace people. I always say the technology won't replace people. it will only replace people who don't know how to use AI. So AI won't replace people, it only replaces those who don't know how to use AI. So I definitely think it's here to stay, right? It's a very valuable tool, but it has its place. And I think having policies, procedures, and the know-how is extremely important to do it in a way that doesn't hurt people. Because otherwise, if you rely too heavily on technology, you can tend to get lazy about certain things. And that may allow something to slip through to your client that could be detrimental to their health. And we certainly wouldn't want that. So you need to have safeguards and checks and balances built into your system. And having like an AI advisor on your team is a great idea, whether that's like somebody that you have as paid staff or consulting with some organization like us where we can come in and kind of already made the trials and errors and can kind of like guide you through that process. So I think that's probably, I would say, the biggest thing that I would worry about people, and prompt engineering, learning how to write a really good prompt to get the data that you want. Because if you use it like Google, you're really not using it to its potential. There is technology out there that will absolutely reason with you. I use one of them. I use is like it's like a quorum of people, and it's like one is the person who says everything's going right, everything's going wrong, and it's like an assembly of 5 people, and there's a chairman. And I use this special prompt to kind of like, if I'm thinking about a policy change or I'm thinking, I put it into this group and they'll like argue about it, and then the chairman will bring back what they said. And I do that with my website all the time because we have a level of change indicator like built into our website that actually is like groundbreaking, that matches people's health to the level that they're willing to go. So it's like if they're not willing to do anything, they're like, I'm not ready yet, they can just talk to our chatbot. If and then the slider moves, and then as it moves, it increases how much help they get from us. So really meeting them where they're at. And that slider, I put it through my little board and I said, hey, what do you guys think of this? And they were like, this is groundbreaking. This is amazing, because sometimes giving too much help can actually be a detriment to somebody when they're not ready. It's like information overload. And so that would be the other point, that I'm trying to make, is that AI can kick out so much that we can really overwhelm our clients. And so it should be, we should have those natural filters built in so that we're not inundating them with information. Be like, I got 16 resources for you. When this mom is trying to raise her kids, she needs 3, and she needs the top 3 that'll actually help her.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you make some great points there. I want to bring it back to language just for a minute, because a lot of these tools are, I've seen at least, are primarily in English, right? And we know the Central Valley has a large Spanish-speaking population,
Yeah.
and as well as other linguistic, diversity. How are translation tools changing what's possible, though? Have you noticed any limitations, in particular, around these sort of emotional and sensitive conversations?
I will say, so the population here, especially in Modesto, is about 55% is Spanish speaking. So that's a huge number. And of that Latino population, 55% of that population is on Medi-Cal. So being able to navigate, like you said, sensitive topics regarding health, social determinants of health, mental health issues, which is a big, there's a lot of stigma within the Latino community. Being half Mexican myself, like, it's like we just rather work through it. Like, oh, no, just go back to work and you'll be fine. That's kind of like the solution, right? But the thing is that I have found that when you get a translation tool out, especially, I use a lot on my phone. There's an earpiece as well that you can wear, and it'll actually translate what they're saying almost live. It's like a millisecond behind. Those tools have become, because I grew up in Michigan, so I didn't take the Spanish classes that I should have when I decided that I was going to move to California when I was 18. And then moving to the Central Valley, I was like, oh shoot, like how do I get a job if I'm not bilingual? It's almost a requirement. And so the translation tools, I'm going to say, are very good. And I think the Latino population also is very forgiving when you try. When they see that you're attempting to communicate in their native tongue versus trying to like this broken Spanish kind of or forcing them to speak English. I think it's an effort thing. And so when they see you as an organization make an effort to translate things in Spanish and have those conversations, and there's tools now that literally they can go back and forth. So I have noticed that the community is very thankful versus any kind of bad experiences. I just used it actually with a gentleman was across the street, and he's living right now in a camper with his young son. And I was trying my best with my broken Spanish, and I was like, you know what, Jared, stop. And I just grabbed up my phone, talked into the translator, found out he needed some water, hooked him up, right, got him snacks. He's working on the property and staying there. And so I was able to do that. And now every time I see him, I wave at him, right, and say hi. And it's just like this friendly interaction because I took that time, to let him know that what we do. And it doesn't have to be a long conversation, right? It can just be expressing what we do and then offering some material, that is in Spanish and letting them know that we'll do our best, that we're not perfect, and we're looking to add Spanish speakers to the team, but that we're really making an effort, and technology has been a huge help for that.
So, for any other small nonprofit directors, anyone out there listening to this and hearing about, how you were able to connect with um, folks in San Francisco to connect you to Japan, with maybe potentially feeling overwhelmed by everything in technology, what's one place that they could start? And 10 years from now, how do you think people in the Central Valley will access mental health and social services? And what does Help Us Hope? What does your role look like in that future?
Okay, so we're gonna have to break that up a little bit.
Couple questions there.
So what was the first one again?
What is one place that a director could start?
I would have them reach out to us, to be honest. If you don't want to have that learning curve, I would say if you're going to start and you want to know whether you should implement technology, I would start talking to download an AI app and start talking to it like you would a spouse or a best friend, and see what the responses are like. The more you interact with it, the more it learns your personality, how you write, and you can have personas like a professional one and a personal one. And the more information that you share, although sometimes it's scary, right? Data breaches and everything. So, keep that in mind. But the thing is that the more you share, the more it adopts your language, knows what you're trying to accomplish, your goals. And so I would say, start, don't stop using it as Google. It's so much more than that. And start using it like a personal assistant. And then if you need more help and you're worried about that learning curve past that on how to implement that technology into your nonprofit, I would definitely reach out to us so that we can do an assessment. We do an assessment to kind of see where you're at, what tools you're using. Like, hey, I'm dabbling in Gemini helping me write my emails, but I'm not doing anything else besides that. Okay, no problem. And then because we need to assess what your clients need, because really it doesn't looking pretty or having all the right words on your website, it means nothing to your clients. And I can tell you that because I watch the Google Analytics, I look at the numbers, and I'm telling you what, they do not write like we write on our websites. They just don't. So I would definitely say, put yourself in the position of someone, like erase everything you know about your nonprofit, dress in regular clothes one day, not in your uniform, and walk through that door like a client. How are you greeted? How are you, what is expected of you? How do you sign in? How does that process look like? And then the same thing for your website, because that's your digital front door, right? And how you walk through it, and how is that technology, what is your language using? Is it really? Because you're like, I'm a trauma-informed organization, but are you really? You know, are you using words that we don't use anymore, right? Are we using does it really, does the language, does the essence, right? Because your organization has a personality, your website should have one as well, that embodies what you're trying to say. Using videos, powerful technology, get them to like you, know you, and trust you. Um, and then if you want to take it to the next level, reaching out to an organization like us where we can really sit down and assess and have a clear idea who your clients are. Because if you don't have a clear direction that your clients are, I can't help you. You need to know like what your core audience is, who you're going for, who you're writing grants for, um, who's walking through the door. You might be marketing to one type of client and find out you have a whole nother type of client walking through the door every day. Talk to your boots on the ground people, get out of your office, be involved, and find out talk to your community health workers, your peer support team, and ask them, what do you need? Where we have gaps? What are you guys suffering with that we don't have tools for? Because we can build so many digital tools that will do the heavy lifting of the everyday tasks so that your teams can really concentrate on the client and make their time with the client extremely meaningful. I know that was your first one. I don't remember the
other two. Yeah, the other part was 10 years from now, looking at how people in the Central Valley will access mental health and social services, and what role does Help is Hope play in that future?
I think looking 10 years ahead for mental health, I know personally, I do telehealth therapy. I was able to find a queer therapist in San Francisco who also matches my personality with some trauma informed. He's went through some life experience. It was really neat. The platform I use was even covered under Medi-Cal, and it gave me access to over 700 providers in the state of California. So it's like, great, there's 20 therapists in town. Now you have to find which one matches you, or you can go online. You can tell them what kind of personality, what you feel like. It's like kind of like your Build-A-Bear, but you get to build a therapist. And so you get to click down these boxes of who you're looking for to somebody that better relates to you, right? Whether it's culturally, it could be, they come from the same ethnic background that you do, or they lived in poverty as a kid, or whatever the situation, and you can find someone who matches you. And I think that's where we're going to be going for mental health in the next 10 years, because I think it's going to be an extremely tailored process. I think people are looking for something that is custom to them, and that we no longer just have to settle for whoever's in town or in a certain radius. I think the world is our oyster, and so we're going to be able to, and health plans are accepting that as well, right? They're realizing that therapy or counseling, or the medical counseling, they offer all kinds of different services. They're going to be, it's going to be lived experience. It goes right back to peer support, because that lived experience is so much more powerful. If I know that this guy not only has an education behind him, but like my therapist works at a hospital in San Francisco dealing with the homeless. And so he knows the struggles that I go through as a nonprofit leader, because he sees the same clients walk through his door. And so when I have frustrations, or I need to empty my cup after doing some really heavy peer support, right, I'm able to go, and he completely gets, because he's doing the same social work in the hospitals that I am. I even asked him pointers like, hey, when is it appropriate to give them things, or versus have them work through a program? And I don't want to create hummingbird syndrome where I constantly give people like food, but I don't help them get access their, CalFresh benefits. And so he was extremely helpful in that. So I think that going forward, that we're going to be looking at tailored mental health and I think lived experience is going to be seen as, no longer is it going to be relegated to like just peer support people. I think therapists, mental health providers, clinicians, it's going to be an asset that you get to mark on your resume that that you had a substance use issue or you had addiction issues and that you overcame them. I think people love a triumph story, and I think knowing that people have been through something similar through you as you and they came out on the other side it gives people hope. It gives people hope that their situation will improve and that they could be maybe one day like that same therapist or clinician. So I think that's where they're going. And I think Help is Hope wants to definitely hitch on that star, right? Like we can see that lived experience has always been a role. We're always going to be a peer-led organization from the top all the way to the bottom. And I think that's important for organizations. You want educated people still leading your organization, but have also a balance of people with lived experience so they can weigh in on these heavy issues when it comes to policies or grants or a direction that your nonprofit may be taking. So I would definitely say that we'll never discount, and we can't. As long as I'm in this driver's seat, we're not going to, because I'm a walking billboard for lived experience, and I know what it feels like to be able to help people, and I definitely want to continue that. And so everybody. And different people have different amounts of lived experience, right? And somebody doesn't have to go through something horribly traumatic, but I would definitely say on your team, have people that are willing to share at least a portion of their story, because it really makes a difference to your clients.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerad, for
Thank you.
sharing all of this. This has been such an insightful conversation. Me personally, I've just always had sort of a love-hate relationship with technology and have always been wary, I think, of AI. And I think a lot of that just stems from not fully understanding how powerful of a tool it can be. Like you're saying, the way that it augments this work and the personal relationships rather than replacing it. So thank you for sharing all of that. I hope for our listeners as well. I hope this has also been helpful to you. Also, just want to share some upcoming events that we have as part of our Access program. We have our next quarterly policy update webinar happening on July 23rd. So we're entering a new fiscal year in California on July 1st. So that'll be helpful to hear some policy updates that are happening from our policy director. We also have a quarterly training webinar happening on August 18th. And then we're also really excited. We're about to begin our statewide road trip. We'll be in LA on August 5th and then traveling throughout the state the next 2 months for our regional events. And we would love to see all of you at those events. We'll put the registration and the flyer in the description so you can learn more about those. And then, of course, continue to follow this podcast. We've got some more exciting guests coming up, more partners, similar to Help is Hope. And we'll be talking about peer support, recovery, legislative updates, and occasionally sharing some calls to action as well. So follow the podcast, share with others, and thank you all for being here today.
Bye. Thank you.